I am Yamato Cannon, and this is Muffin, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for an episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is going to be SeeEl, one of the coaches of Rogue. In case you're wondering, I know people have a hard time putting two and two together now in esports. His name's Christopher Lee, so the initials would be SeeEl. So what he's done there, he's obviously played sort of a game with his name, hasn't he? It's not SeeEl, basically, is all I'm saying at the beginning anyway. So let's just start out. I will say this interview is largely, spoiler, going to be based around what else I said in that sentence. The fact you are a coach in Rogue. Obviously, Rogue has just won the LEC. This is quite a momentous occasion, not least for the history of Rogue and a lot of their players, but also I'd say for the LEC. Remember, people might forget this, but when Mad Lions won, there was that stat where it was like, wasn't it like the fourth organisation ever to win the LEC? Like, I don't think people realise it's not a region where you have all these crazy winners. It's actually one where, despite the fact it's different players, it's fairly consistent organisations. And I'm sure most people would then spin that into a narrative about the way top organisations run and how they bring in players and talent and all the rest of it. So I just want to start out initially, actually, by just asking a few things about you, and then we'll get into the meat and veg of things that happen with Rogue and some of the matches. And obviously what's cool is it's a rare scenario, especially because, by the way, Worlds is on like a different patch with different strengths and things have been nerfed and stuff. We could potentially even go into certain things that if we were in the regional world would have to be trade secrets, wouldn't they? They'd have to be the secret source. You couldn't tell us at that point in time. People might complain if you're on a talk show, so hypothetically, you know, who knows? Whatever, I'd still be fire on whatever that hypothetical talk show is. I'm sure I'll dominate, it'd be decent. Well, whoever would be on the other talk show, that's really irrelevant. So let's just start out here. Since obviously you come, people will be able to tell by your accent, from the Oceanic region. What I wanted to actually ask you, just quite simply, is did you actually always apply yourself when you're in the Oceanic region to try to be someone who understands like the meta of the game, who understands like the strategical elements? Because I know over in that region, a lot of people think it's like, it's quite a challenging place to play. If people don't know, famously, like in Australia, for example, you actually, if you just basically look up geography, you can't even have good internet within one country because the two main areas are so far apart. So a lot of it is just like, I would say a lot of it had a very a semi-pro, amateurish feel about it. I didn't always know, do people try to be world-class at things over there? People just sort of, I mean, they have a pretty chill vibe, but they're just sort of like, hey, it's cool to play esports, it's cool that we've got esports. What was your sort of background in that sense? Have you been trying to be a nerd and be a top thinker or something? Has it always been a goal?
I mean, of course, I think every coach strives to be a top thinker, right? But when I first started, it definitely wasn't the case. So I think I initially started off with the mindset that I want to learn as much as I can in OS, and then expand my horizons after if I can manage to get an opportunity somewhere else, right? So that's always been the case. And the actual common misconception about Oceania, right? And a lot of people don't know this because we're kind of an irrelevant region.
Yeah, sure.
is that the ping is actually super low. So the general mechanical ability, I remember Dom talking about this as well, is actually quite high. The problem is the queue times, and obviously
because it's just too small. So I'm guessing you have two servers and they're just super small or something.
Well, it's just one server, but the thing is, like, only Australians have really good ping. Everyone else kind of has bad ping.
Right. Okay, right.
And then you have a lot of a plethora of other problems, like small region, you know, win trading and high elo, like this kind of stuff. So
sure.
So it makes it very hard to develop. But I would say that the majority of professionals starting out in OS, at least when I started, had that mindset where, okay, we really want to be as close to world class as possible and just try and find opportunities to go to a market that's much bigger and more successful, right? So that was the case. Nowadays, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about the level there, but yeah, that was definitely the case when I started.
One other thing I just wanted to address early on, it's also why I asked what you think about as a thinker, etc. Because I'm not joking. If you'd have actually just gone and done a Freddy 122, you coach Rogue, you stand behind Rogue, I guess Mike Checks would have given it away eventually. You actually could have basically gone under the radar. Like, two things would have sold it for you completely, mate. One, because you're suddenly like the assistant coach, you'd have been on some Nelson vibes. So it was like, oh, they've brought in like the big guns now. They've brought in some like super Asian guy who knows everything. And also, because you have the Korean flag, people would be like, wow, this must be like the connection to Malrang. Oh, it's just everything. This is like, oh my God. Is there actually any connection between you and Korea and Korean esports? Do you actually speak Korean? Can you speak to Malrang? Can you give me any thoughts on that? Is it just a case that essentially you're Australian, but you have the ethnicity of coming from Korea? What's the situation there?
Well, growing up, I obviously, I actually migrated to Australia when I was very young.
I've heard that's the case in quite a lot of people, right? I know Ashley Kang has a similar story, right? Is there a reason why that is, right? Was there a certain time period where people just moved to Australia?
I mean, I think it was just a lot of people wanted to find opportunities, abroad, and there was this whole craze about being able to speak English as a second language.
Okay.
So,
Right.
I mean, back in the 2000s when I first migrated, not many Koreans were speaking English at a high level. Nowadays, it's more like a national curriculum. So I think a lot of Koreans can speak English, but
It's quite impressive, yeah, if you go to Seoul, yeah. A lot
yeah.
of people, even just shop owners who know stuff, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but my mum obviously just tried to bring me over here to learn English short term and go back, and then eventually it ended up being that we loved the country so much and we stayed, right? So that's kind of the backstory. But at the same time, growing up,
I'm sure you're speaking Korean with your parents, right?
yeah, exactly. So I only speak Korean when I'm at home, and also I went to Korea quite often when I was younger.
Ah, okay.
So I'm able to converse in Korean at the native level, and I think that's kind of a big obvious giveaway when they're trying to go for a coach that hasn't had a prestigious
Sure.
background, right? But they're still hiring me, So that was one of my big selling points for sure. Initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Along those lines, then, did you actually, at what point were you aware of Korean esports? Was it something actually, did you know about it when you went back there in the past? When you went there, for example, if people don't know, this is like a bit of a misnomer in the West as well, right? It's true. Faker himself has now put in, remember, 10 years of work when he was, so he has actually achieved the boxer, flash status, etc. But I don't think people realise. It's like people would know who Boxer is. Spoiler, that guy like stopped being like world class in, I don't know, 2005 or something. But they would know like the greatest player ever because it's equivalent to Michael Jordan. You'd have to know basketball, right? But I think a lot of Western fans don't know. You couldn't just go up on the street and go, did you know Deft made another world champ? Like, no one's not going to know what you're talking about. So, like, was it the case when, did you have any sense of, like, StarCraft or any of the things that were going on when you were going back?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I definitely watched some esports on TV. I thought it was like one of the better things to watch. And that was actually around the time of Yellow and Boxer and
Oh, cool.
for this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'd watch that live on TV and everything, but it was never the case where I was like, oh, I'm going to play video games or I'm going to coach video games growing up. It was more like, oh, this is very cool. And I think that idea kind of stayed at the back of my mind until, I was much older, where I got a couple opportunities and just kind of pursued it that way. In Korea, I think there's just this kind of mysticism about esports because of how national the sport is and how widely accepted it is as a career, and even more so nowadays, right? So.
One thing I would like to know is, I always think an issue with how people in the West like perceive the success of Korean esports or how many brilliant players there are. You can see it in how they do import players and coaches and stuff, because it seems like they really just believe it's just being Korean. It's like you're like an elf in Lord of the Rings or something. You just have all these extra abilities. But I've always seen it like, again, largely as like a cultural phenomenon. Like, I think to me, I've always thought the interesting thing is, I've noticed in Korea, a lot of the people in society focus on very similar things, and actually like shared interests is kind of like a bonding thing in society. So for example, they all know the same K-pop groups and the same K-dramas and the same, there's actually these, if people don't know, there's these like talk shows with like semi-celebrities. In fact, Guillaume, the guy who won that OGN way back, he's on one of them. They're like, there's these things that are like a semi-reality thing with like a like semi-celebs talking about culture and stuff, and all these things are about watching the same things, the same variety shows. Everyone's on the same things. It's like, it almost reminds me of the old days in like other countries when you had like 3 channels. It's like everyone watches the same thing all the time. But similarly, when it comes to obviously work, it's infamous, the Korean work ethic. People try really hard, and if I always tell fans in the West, I'm not talking about superstar athletes and singers and people. You'll get people who are doing ordinary jobs where it's like, the joke is the idea of overtime pay can sometimes be a crazy. You just do your best anyway, and if your boss says you've got to get this finished and we've got to get this project done, people are just going 100% all the time. So I think those combined have made this culture where you've got massive amounts of interest in esports, but also people going so hard to be the best. Right? What I want to ask is this, essentially: does any of that carry through to you? Does it carry in your family? Does it go abroad? If you go abroad, do you become a bit more like the people there? Do you become a bit more Australian? What would you say the mix is in that sense?
I mean, absolutely, I carry some of those cultural qualities in terms of working hard, but I have an alternative view, because I think there's a difference between working hard and having a performance-orientated mindset where you set some little processes, taking small wins, and really like just understanding the balance between mental health and performance and happiness. And I think that goes for general work culture as well. And the problem with Korea, and I definitely inherited some of this like subconsciously for sure, is that initially Korea, most people think it was a very wealthy country, but initially it was a very poor country, right? Post Korean War, it was one of the poorest countries in the world. We had a lower GDP than Philippines, and there was this economic boom called the Miracle of the Han River, similar to what Germany went through, the Miracle of the Rhine, right? So that kind of toxic work culture of really pushing and working super hard carried on through the next generations. But there's a lot of studies to show that this is not actually the best way to run corporations, or the most productive way to achieve performance or increase productivity in general, right? So, I mean, for sure, some of that is ingrained in the back of my head from my parents, from experiencing, from talking to people, and also from my general life experiences. Like, I moved out when I was 17 years old. I had 3 jobs. I was a waiter, a bartender, like everything you can think of, right? But in the end, I do recognize that, some of this needs to be controlled, and that it's not necessarily the best way to go about it. And one more thing is, obviously, people have that mysticism about Korean players and Korean coaches. But what's really happening is that that I think that there is this overwhelming issue that is conscription in Korea, where you have to go to the army. So people feel extremely pressured to have to maximize the amount of time and effort that they put in before they go to the army. And in one way, it created this extremely toxic culture where you replace really quickly, and players tend to just mental boom. And when I spoke to Malrang, I mean, he really had the same thought process. He thought that we should be scrimming 13 days a fortnight, having 1 day rest. He thought that we weren't practicing enough, and he thought that EU will always have a hard time competing against the Asian teams if this is a culture that we perpetuated. But in reality, I think what we really need to be focusing on is the science behind it, and really the idea behind tying performance coaching and performance to work hours in general, and general happiness and mental health. Especially the older players get, when you look at longevity behind players, which will undoubtedly get longer the more developed esports becomes, right? So yeah, I mean, Odo Amne is older than me. So, I mean,
Sure.
I think it's very important.
Well, along those lines, that's one thing I want to ask about, because obviously I would say, for people who don't just stupidly dismiss Rogue and say that, who cares, each split they lose to G2, so they were never really that good anyway, that sort of angle that people have. Because I've kept saying to people, like, I've never seen a team with this sort of, like, even before your years, how many times in the regular season they're just consistently winning the games. Like, this can't be coincidence, guys. Like, you don't trip over and have, 5 or 6 splits in a row. Like, it doesn't happen. And then with different players, like, this implies there's a process, there's a philosophy, there's a way of adapting to the game. So what I want to ask you is this. Similarly, I've heard from so many teams on camera and off camera, actually Rogue's one of their favourite teams to practice. Or whereas there are certain teams, certain notorious teams, who have amazing players and top teams all the time, and I've heard they're like crap to practice against because they limit test 24/7. They have the jungler that goes 0/7 and goes go next, and like all that stuff. They draft stuff that they never play in the game because they're sort of having fun with it, or just like testing out some wacky stuff. I've heard the reason they love Rogue is like you're actually going to get something that is within the net. It's going to probably be similar to what you play in an actual LEC game. You actually in the scrims, they say, play like a bit like the LEC stage to some degree. Obviously, no one really does, but as a result, it's a practice. You can sort of measure yourself against that. So I think the perception of a lot of people, and it even is a narrative I've heard spun, it's like, well, because this is the split where they didn't finish top, and maybe because now people don't think they're that good, maybe they sort of like loosened up a bit, and that allowed them to like finally win. So what I want to ask essentially is, from the time you've been there, what's been the practice philosophy of Rogue? Because they could have been seen maybe from the outside with these stories as maybe they're the Korean grinders. They just go in, they practice properly every game. You do the scrim block, you never take a game. What has it been like that? How has Rogue been able under you and your coaching staff to achieve such excellence? And what's the philosophy been in that sense of how to practice and how much to practice?
Well, I think the idea behind how we approach practice really stems not just from like one party, but both the players and the coaches and management, right? So it's like a combination of all three. In one way, Freddie obviously takes scrims very seriously, but at the same time, you wouldn't be able to perpetuate that kind of culture if you didn't have an astounding degree of competitiveness within the players. And I think, if you look at Odo Amne, for example, if you muck around in scrims, it's not going to be a pleasant day for you. That I can
Bloody flames, yeah.
And obviously the problem in the past has been how can you control this kind of environment? And that's why I think I came in and provided a lot of value, especially when, we were considered the underdogs and were predicted 6th or 7th. And even when I was hired, that was, briefly discussed, right? But in terms of overall practice culture and what people want to achieve, it's just a general, very serious, regulated environment where people have to try hard, where people are holding each other accountable and to a high standard. And a lot of that credit goes to, the backbone of the management and what they believe in performance philosophy, and Freddie 122 as well, right? So Freddie, I mean, to give you a best description of Freddie, he's that guy that doesn't talk too much, but when he says something, people listen, right? And he's also an ex-player, so he kind of gives me, like when I'm dealing with him, obviously, it kind of gives me the vibes of a giga veteran player that has encompassed some of the captain role that you would expect some of the more player-driven teams to have, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Perks figure, but talks a lot less. And he obviously has experience playing as well. So I think that kind of experience helps a lot in developing an environment and a culture about how we should be practicing and what's good and what's bad.
Okay. Obviously, as I alluded to before, it was going to be a question with your Korean background of what is your interaction with Malrang. One thing I want to ask was this, right? The problem every time a Korean joins any Western team, right, is the discussion becomes, it's like a 2-second Q&A. It's like, does he speak English? And they're never going to go, of course not, because what a stupid answer that would be. What they always say is yes, and then the question becomes, to what extent? Like, here's the thing. From what I've heard in the interviews, sure, people are definitely a lot more nervous in interviews. And what I've heard on, like, mic checks, this is the reason why I think that question doesn't even serve any purpose, and I'd rather, like, refine it down, which is more like, how much does he communicate his ideas specifically? How much does he outline what he wants to do or wants someone to do? Because I get the vibe, listening to him interviewed outside the game and then looking at the mic checks, that it's more like, here's the thing. Yes, he's communicating. Maybe he says to Odoamne, I go in. But that's not really the same as if someone perfectly fluent in English was like, like when he hits you with the Q, I'll come behind and then you get him on the minion with the C set. Like there's obviously a big difference between them out there. So give me a sense, like what's Malrang's way of working in his first year, admittedly, in the West? What's it been like working with the team? Because I would say most people probably get this question. Most people think he's been sort of a revelation in this team and has somewhat inspired the style of the team.
I apologize, actually. I was meant to answer that question before, but
That's good. Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah. First, I think it's important to note that Marang's English is actually quite good. So although in interviews he's going to be like, I just go in or whatever, in the game, with game-specific language and what's being said inside the game, he has a very high understanding of what's going on. I'd say 95%.
Oh, okay.
Post 95%. And he's also quite descriptive, right? Like, I'm hitting this guy, I'm going to EQ, I go in, out, tap, reset, Baron, whatever. He can do all these calls. Okay. Now, outside of the game, this is where he struggles a little bit. Of course, we push him to take English lessons, we push him to speak English, and I try to not translate when I can because, frankly speaking, that's not why I was hired. It was like kind of a risk management. Side
benefits or whatever.
Yeah. It's a side benefit, but it's not like necessarily what we want to do. And if we want to have a long-term picture with this guy, he needs to learn to speak English, right? So, the most help that he needs is during reviews when more complex topics are brought about and things about draft and his view on the game. And facilitating that has been one of the more primary challenges, right? Because he has such a Eastern view of the game, and if certain champions are not picked or picked in a certain way or not banned from him, the game is hard. So a lot of discussion, debate, and kind of problem solving was needed, right, to find a solution for this guy. And in the end, I would say that we're quite successful because we won, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a complex topic having Koreans. My personal philosophy with Koreans is that if you have a Korean, you need a Korean coach, ideally a Korean head coach, and a Korean coach that is outgoing and very communicative. Is that a word?
Yeah,
expressive. Yep. Very expressive. And that happens to be me in this team, right? So I can correctly identify what he wants. I can correctly identify, what other people want, and kind of give a decent balanced view where from there we can make a decision. And before, you also asked about, Korean culture, and I think that reflects in this question as well. What a lot of people don't know is in my first year when I joined the Chiefs as the GM and head coach, we went to Korea. Well, I got hired while I was in Korea, and we ended up doing this short meeting with DRX. And at the time, the coach for DRX was CB Max. So, I discussed the game a bit with him there. I talked to the Korean coaches there, and I also have some Korean connections. So I do definitely have a little bit of that influence in terms of game knowledge and how things are built. But the general kind of structure for me has been built through a collection of speaking to people from all different industries, from performance to NA coaches, like in-game NA coaches and EU coaches as well. So it's all a mix for me personally. But yeah, I think that summarizes and answers that question.
Obviously, the narrative that basically was all over the place this year, especially, was when Rogue got good, because obviously, like you implied, everyone did. Well, not everyone. I had them like maybe fourth or fifth or something, but a lot of people were like, right, since all these other teams have upgraded, like, fuck them. Are they even a playoff team? Was sort of the question about Rogue, which seems absurd now, but that was actually the take. But the take's logical in a way, because if the MVP was inspired last year, and then everyone thought Hans Sama carried Worlds, if those two players leave, then if other people thought they were only third best anyway, then logically they drop down, right? So obviously the Malrang move is the big one, because if people don't know, it's not really a secret or a revelation that comp is good. It just somehow it didn't work out in Vitality for whatever reasons. But in terms of Malrang, that is the one where I don't think anyone predicted this come in. It's actually similar to what happened with Yonghoon in Astralis. I don't think anyone really. I never heard any vibes behind the scenes like, watch out though, this guy actually might be really sick. It was more like, who? Okay, I don't think I've ever heard of this guy. Is he going to be good? And so I think the interesting topic to me was this. Thankfully, because of what Inspired's been able to do in NA with Evil Geniuses, luckily he sort of redeemed that part of the story. And the story isn't just like it was cut in Inspired that made it work. But obviously, if you look at the two teams, if you look at when they had Inspired last year before you and they had Marang now, they are very different teams. And clearly the junglers are massively defining in terms of the style of play. Like basically even how the players seem to engage with the game. Like it's not really painting with the broader strokes to say the old Rogue was a bit more conservative and a bit more about farm up, and then you just find like the really obvious but like you can't go wrong sort of engages fight scenarios. Also, they were the classic team for me where if you start a little skirmish and maybe it was ill-advised, it's actually the Korean style, you sacrifice the one guy who's caught so the rest of you can get out, and then you think, right, regroup, find another angle, again, small wins, get us back in the game. Whereas I have to say the team I've seen to this year, as it's grown over the year, it is very much the Malrang style of play. Like people know that he just likes to go in. Like the joke I always say is like he's never seen a jungle angle gank that he didn't like. Every angle just must look good to him. He finds a way to rationalise it, and then he just goes in and figures out after the fact that it's fair. But the team now embraces that. You can see that they follow him up. I think this finals was the craziest example ever. It's like that was just bubbling under the surface, and then the finals it came out in such an insane way. Like the joke I would have is if you took the nameplates off that final, all these Rogue haters, and you showed them it like at the beginning of the year, and you were like, what team and what region would that be? I guarantee you, if they watched only the final of this LEC, they would say like a really aggressive LPL team. Yeah. That's what they would say. They would be like, this has to be like, like top esports or something. Look at the way they just re-engage. They think every fight's like winnable. They're coming back in on that wasn't Rogue, dude. That wasn't Rogue before you and Malrang came. So can you give me some thoughts? What has Malrang brought to the team? What is it?
Yeah.
Is he consciously doing some of this stuff? Has the team bonded with him? How's it work?
It's actually a much more complex question, but I'll start with what Marang brings to the table. I think what Marang brings is creativity in terms of his pathing, and he really understands tempo super well. So he understands what part of the jungle he can give while still being relevant in the game. And he understands, I think, the best in Europe, if not, tied for the second best in Europe with, or the best in Europe with Jankos, with how the jungle role should be played right now, like mathematically speaking, because right now the jungle role has been nerfed multiple times to the point where camps are worth less and there's a lot of catch-up EXP. So he really understands when he can skip camps and go for an aggressive play, and if the net value that he gets from lanes, for example, is higher than the amount of gold that he would get farming, then he will always go for that. So when people,
right. So he's not just doing psycho ganks like everyone thinks then.
Yeah. So this is what I was talking to you about
right.
at the beginning, right? And a lot of people were confused, but I couldn't talk about it because it's very specific.
Sure.
So for example, like if you have Jarvan and you're two camp clearing and you're going through mid before going into bot, you use one turn to attack mid, for example, and in that turn you've missed one camp. But if that one turn ends up being a greater gold value later down the line than that one camp, then that gank is worth it. And even if you're 2 levels down, if you kill like basically 2 camps right now, you're back down to like 1 level down and you're still completely relevant in the game, right? So I think he really understands that gold value very, very well. And another thing is obviously, as I said, the creativity, dodging enemy vision and finding good angles to fight. So a lot of this stuff is extremely beneficial for Rogue, which have always been a lane-centric team. Now, in terms of what he brings from a macro sense, Obviously, the direct benefit from having an aggressive jungle like this is that you play more for lanes, and these laners can provide significant advantages. Just like what happened in the G2 finals, right? Where we had 3 winning lanes essentially, and I'd say a lot of that comes down to how well Marang plays, but it also comes down to how well we utilize systems. Now, I think that first of all, a lot of that comes from both Freddie and I's view on the game, in my opinion, not just the players, because Freddie, for example, has a really, really lane-orientated style, and I think everyone knows this at this point in terms of draft. And I have a very systems-orientated style in terms of like creating consistency and systems inside the game in terms of execution, position, retaking, and all this, right? So what essentially happened was we had the perfect combination, the perfect storm of a jungler that was willing to do anything, not just play for himself, but play for the team, as well as the perfect set of ideas for draft, right? So that we can execute it inside the game, combined with an improved systems approach where we can add consistency to our mid game so we don't fall off. And I mean, that's where the whole rogue time myth came from, right?
Yep.
So people were always like, oh, after 20 minutes they suck. But what really happened was, okay, in this situation we do this. At level 1 we ward here. When this happens we do this and we retake like this. Marang is going to do this to this and this, and he's going to comb this before the game, and this is how we play. So all of these came together. So I'd say that they were very complementary, and that's what allowed him to shine. And what people don't really know about Marang was that he was actually considered a prodigy when he first started, right? He was a really big deal when he first came, and a lot of teams wanted him. And he debuted the same time that Tarzan did, and he shit on Tarzan when he first started. Now what happened was he took the route where he went to KT and Jin and suffered, and Tarzan went to CV Max and learned the game a lot, and he developed a lot as a player. So what the myth that followed Malrang was that, you know, he would be as good as how good his teams were. So if his teams were really good, he'd be good. But what was really happening was that I felt like he never really had a good team to play for. And the humbling thing about being a player and a coach is that if your teammates are not good, it's actually really hard to make good results. So actually overall, in terms of his style, in terms of understanding what he needs to do on the map, he's very dynamic, he's flexible, and he understands the current meta very, very well. And I forgot to mention one more thing. So I remember saying that he's just going for these ganks because people are inting their wave states. I think there's a lot of laning issues in Europe, and you know, Marang really, really showed that in spring, where he was basically perma ganking and getting a kill. Like it was 1 gank, 1 kill, right? But he can also farm. Like he's not stupid. It's really not hard to farm, right? So what ended up happening was the original G2 strategy against us, and a lot of the strategies that people brought against Marang was that, oh, we're just going to track this guy, we're going to find this guy, and if we know what he does early, it's all good. No, I mean, if he's found, he'll just go farm, and our laners will play better than their laners, and then my jungler will match their jungler, and then we're really happy, right? So yeah, I think that's just kind of the summary, right? But obviously, also a lot of credit goes to the laners in Rogue as well, because I think that they're very, very high level laners too.
Oh, absolutely. Right. One thing I want to ask about specifically, because let's be real, it is just completely associated with Malrang at this point. Yeah. It is the champion Jarvan. Like, the joke is, I actually was doing a watch party for this finals, and on the game where Jankos played Jarvan, there was like a catch at some point. And I was like, why would Malrang go for that though? Because I was looking at, and someone was like, wait, he's not actually the Jarvan this time. I was like, fuck it, he's just so imprinted in my brain that's like, that champion is him. It's just, it seems to fit his style so perfectly. Well, if people don't know, if you go and look it up, right, obviously, yes, that's a champion classically. You will see Jankos default to sometimes in the playoffs. But aside from that, it's not actually considered, if people don't know, it's not even close to the best jungle pick right now. It's not like the shit that you must pick this first in draft. And so if you look, right, if you go and watch the LPL guys, if you watch the LPL playoffs, I think it was played like 5 times. It's barely ever used in the LPL. It's not a champion they're using. They don't think it's super strong, right? And I've noticed in Europe, it tends to be more the Jankos type player takes that because they're a super vet. What they're using it for is like, look, it's got a really good kit no matter how strong it is. And so if I could catch the right people, my super carries kill them all. Brilliant, right? But the Malrang, it just seems to be like the best champion for him no matter what the meta is. Can you give me some sense? Why does it work so well for Malrang and Rogue?
Well, the thing about Jarvan specifically is that he clears really fast. He has extremely strong ganks, right, from level 2 onwards. And he has a super high value kit, even though he's behind in levels, right? So what that allows him to do is it gives us a pick that allows us to move first on the map, 1 turn faster than the enemy can almost always, right? So he can do level 2 ganks, he can skip a camp and gank bot. He's also down to be down 1 level, right? It just brings a lot of utility, and it brings a lot of early game pressure that we can utilize to snowball our leads better. So this has been a really, really beneficial pick for us for that reason. But also what people don't realize about Jarvan is that when people pick, the classic strong 1v1 jungles like Trundle, the identity of these 1v1 jungles that are meta right now is to, go into enemy jungle and find these picks. But what Jarvan brings is that even if you're behind in the game, these 1v1 jungles can push you out, but they can never really kill you because you're going to just EQ out and run away.
Yes,
right?
Sure.
So this makes it very hard to catch them, and it also makes it very easy to get vision for the team, right? Which is where the big meme where we bought 20 pink wards or something came from as well, because his role in the team is to do exactly that, facilitate the lanes and find vision and really find the enemy jungle and make the game like really lane orientated, right?
Was he going too far with the pink quads? Would you agree?
Yeah, of course.
Wasn't there a game where he had like 20 or something?
I mean,
that's a pretty good. Instead, if you're a support player, you'd get like full marks from the coach for that. But like for a jungler, for a ganking jungler, that seems a bit wild.
Yeah, I mean, he knows too, right? But I also think in his defense, it was actually a really hard game to play in terms of like. Just turtling and buying time, and what you need to do in those situations is to just constantly move your defensive vision so that your laners can play. And I think his mentality in the game was, okay, he will get the vision and then my laners can catch up faster. And of course, in one sense it was right, but in another sense there were a couple of really efficient spots that you could just chuck it and then like play with his flag or something, right? So yeah. I mean, he's definitely not the perfect player, but he is, I think, a really, really, really good world-class player. And people have been underestimating him and undervaluing him for such a long time because it's so different to how European junglers play in terms of efficiency. Now, the question that I have to ask the Europeans and all these doubters are then, okay, are you sure that the European way of jungling is the correct way to play in this current...
Yeah, I have a topic on someone asked about.
Yeah, and of course I can go more into detail about that, but that was also one of the reasons why I told you in the FNATIC instance where I couldn't go into detail more. I remember you asking, okay, what do you think about FNATIC? And I said, I can't go into it because I think it's very specific and, it might give off hints. And I think we proved that when we went 3-1 against them, right? We're able to pick things like Lucian Nami every game, play double mage, and we're still getting away with it. So,
Well, let me ask the segue then, because I actually had a similar question.
Yeah.
One area I've noticed that, especially Westerners, that this is the two that they always go on about with Malrang is one is he always picks really unusual rune choices, and then they think sometimes he picks the one that like isn't the one for the style he's going to play, as opposed to that champion you would go this one or Conqueror or whatever whatever the angle would be, right? They think one he's got an unusual one on that, so I'm very interested in what you think about that because you said he's quite a calculating player. And then the second angle is this, and this is one where I've tried to almost push back here, but I know that like I'm not a pro, so a lot of people won't care about this, mate. When they say he never completes the items, I've actually noticed that's a really Korean thing compared to any other region in the world. The other regions really do, by the way. I think the West is terrible for just building the build no matter what is happening in the game, just completing the build that in solo queue you do and that you win with most of the time. I think the West they just really do believe like this is the best item second, this is the best item third, right? But I've noticed in his case, obviously people critique it if he doesn't complete the item, but he reminds me a lot more actually of, it's actually even how Koreans played StarCraft, if you don't know. You might have the opening set down, I'm going to do an opening like this, but as the game goes on, you constantly are adjusting like the tech path and like how much you harass or defend based on the opponent. It's like a chess match, isn't it? You're trying to like even it out. So I've noticed that some of the Korean players want actually the sort of, they don't want to like commit to one path when the game's uncertain in a way, or if the game looks like it's starting to turn into a different type of game, they're sort of willing to be behind on their item build to be like, I'm going to go more towards this type of an item next instead of, I won't complete that one. I got the health from it, but now I actually want to get this thing because maybe this game's about Baron, for example, or maybe this game's going to be more about like defense or whatever. Can you give me some thoughts on these two angles?
Yeah, for sure. One about the itemization, I think it is like player dependent. But I can say for sure that I think a lot of pro players are not intelligent with the way they build. I'm not actually an item expert myself.
Fair enough.
When I was lane coaching and I was like really paying attention to this stuff, sure, but I think it's one of those things where you need to spend a lot of time memorizing and kind of like updating on the patches and changing your builds and doing a lot of theory crafting. And that's not really my job. My job is to like make a really strong, coherent, consistent team, right? So the person that comes in to help us with that is actually Nico, our head of analytics. And a lot of people don't give him enough credit for this. But we have a full set of analysts that work with us, and they really go in depth about GOUD gold efficiency and how good that is. And combined with that, as you said, Korean mindset of being a little bit adaptive to each situation, we're able to pick that up and find quite efficient builds in a lot of situations. I'm not saying that some of his builds are the most efficient, because I know for a fact that, analysts weren't particularly on board with that either. Right? Sure. That was like, I think that gives enough of a background there, but in a lot of cases, I think, for example, double ruby crystal, like giant spell, these things are like super gold efficient items, especially if you're, a low resource tank, right? So yeah, these are things that we implement very well. And also, where that Korean mindset comes from is, in my opinion, exactly what you said, which is like the StarCraft idea of being adaptive. I think like people like Fantasy and Boxer and even like Flash, these were people that were very well known for this, right? Go 2 racks into like Valkyrie build, for example, or Vulture drop build. These things were all like innovated, and Marang grew up with that stuff too. I know for a fact he plays a little bit of Brood War as well. So I think a lot of these little things influence the way that he thinks about the game and what he wants to do. And they are still well thought out. They're not things that are done for no reason. For example, I saw the other day where a couple content creators, I don't specifically remember who, maybe it was LS, was talking about the inefficiency of Chemtech, the heal cut item, the 800 gold heal, execution is calling, sorry.
There you go.
And they were talking about how inefficient that completed item was, but what he's really building that for example, is like, if you're versing a jungler and you're trying to get vision on your own, in his respective role in the team, if he has to get vision on his own, he needs to be able to win 1v1, or he needs to be able to pressure, and he can't do that without reducing the healing of the enemy jungler. So even if it's a gold inefficient item overall, it can be extremely gold efficient in the circumstances of our game. And that's kind of where it comes in, right? And also things like lethal tempo too, right? When he takes lethal tempo on Jarvan, it's a very, very uncharacteristic rune, same for phase rush. But the reason people take it is, once again, like, okay, you're playing versus Vi, for example, Jarvan versus Vi. Jarvan's stronger level 2. He wants to go for a level 2 invade where he's stronger, fast, into enemy jungle. And he knows for a fact that when he takes lethal tempo, he just does more DPS than he would when he takes Conqueror. So even though overall, and when you look at a game from a 30-minute or 25-minute perspective, these runes may be less effective, if you're able to get gold value from getting real leads inside the game, then does that really matter, right? So I think that item spikes and rune advantages can really be situational. And it's the same for things like Scorch. I know that a lot of people were against the rune Scorch and the sorcery tree. But I know that, for example, my mid laner Larson takes Scorch in a lot of matchups, especially after the buffs, because it makes a difference in lane in terms of how many potions you drink, and that actually ends up being 2 to 3 waves. So people don't actually go too far in the whole game tree and game theory tree, and I actually feel like that level of understanding is lower. That's why they don't do that. And if you see Larson's stats, I mean, they don't lie. He's, I think, the best laner in the West. I think personally, I think that when he's on control mages, he's the best player at control mages, and a lot of that comes down to his prowess with itemization, with runes, with how smart he is about laning and positioning and pushing those leads.
Sure. Like one thing I thought I'd do is we'll use these topics to segue into specific questions about the big matches that people want to know about. So the Malrang question I had before we go on some of the other players is actually just the simple question, which goes like this. Since I know if people are going by like global meta thinking and like, these are the strongest things, you must ban them. And you know how fans are. Idiot, why didn't you ban the famous champion that's carrying games? Like, they don't think of the context or the order of the draft. They just want a Yumi banned every game. They just want a Zeri banned every game. How could you let him get X? That is like fan thinking. So I want to know more from you guys' perspective, right? Obviously, in hindsight, it's easy to go, it's good they didn't ban Jarvan every game against Malrang, but it's not as simple as that. What I want to know is this. When you're actually doing the draft and you're on stage with them, and they give you, like FNATIC lets you take a game 5 Jarvan for Malrang. In the case of G2, they eventually just give up the Jarvan themselves, and they're fine letting you pick it each time, and they'd never attempt to ban it. In this case, right, obviously the games are done now. Was that like silly from those coaches? Is there a logic as to why it doesn't, like they think it, like would it on Trundle they think he'd still be as fine or something? Like why it's, obviously if you watch the games it seems like he's good on Trundle and all these other things, but he's amazing on Jarvan in some of these cases, and that is what if I'm his coach, that's what I want him on a game 5 or a game where you're down in the series. Like get him on that. We know what we're going to do. Yeah,
I actually think that. So you're talking about the G2 finals
and the FNATIC lower bracket one, and then the G2 final, yeah.
Yeah, so I think with those ones specifically, I think that we took a while to I'll start with G2. So we took a while to figure out G2 as a team. We were never really worried about FNATIC. We can go more into that later if you have that question. But for G2 specifically, I think that they had this like formula, like a winning formula, which is simple, easy to play comps, and putting bot lane weak side. But the problem is that I think that, and I talked about this in my YouTube channel before the semifinals actually.
Right.
And I said that I think that G2 lacks the explosiveness that we do in our bot side, right? And once we figure that out, and once we force them into either picking very suboptimal champs in the bot side, right, or into handshaking us and a skill matchup on bot, they were really limited in their options strategically. So I wouldn't actually say it's Dylan's fault at all. I think that it was more so that we had better players in the bot side in terms of the bot lane 2v2. I wouldn't say better players overall because that would be disrespectful, right? I'm sure, I know for a fact that FNATIC has a lot of value when it comes to, playing enchanters and playing things for his team like Soraka and Seraphine. He's always been good at that if you look at his Ultra Liga games, not Ultra Liga, LVP games as well.
Yes.
But in terms of a pure 2v2, it really is, I think, one-sided, and we're able to force that handshake, and by then it was like, okay, we need more bans. So what can we open? Okay, this guy's beating us on everything, so let's open Jarvan. And I think that's kind of what happened. And we're more than happy to take that trade, right? We're more than happy to handshake a skill matchup.
Yes. So now let's do it, because obviously the meta of the bot lane, it's interesting because it's implied maybe it won't be at Worlds. That's actually one of the things I found very interesting recently when I've been listening to all the expert opinions. But let's be real, like in the West especially, it was all about the bot lane. Like the entire drafts became about bot lanes, about what combo you had. Obviously, like LCS was very different to LEC, but LEC eventually became quite defined by certain things. That's one thing I wanted to ask you about, right? Your bot lane, I would say, if you look at comp, he's played pretty much all like the strong ones you'd want to play. He's got all of those in his locker. But to me, the interesting angle, this is what a fan will always miss, is it seems like Trimby just has an infinite support pool. Like if you want support counter pick, if you want a certain matchup, if you want to create a bot lane where they've banned out the traditional Caitlyn partner or they've banned out the one with the, he's always got something, right? So what would you say is, how are these players influencing what you can do in the draft?
I mean, as I said in my previous interviews, I think that a coach is a really humbling role, right? I think no matter how good you are as a coach, at what level, you are directly impacted by the amount of the players that you have, sorry. And so, the fact that we can play any of these champions bot side, the fact that we can drop into 5th pick and he'll always find a good pick that, can dominate the game, right? As long as we use our bans correctly and whatnot, is obviously massively influential and helpful toward our game. And I know for a fact that he puts a lot of time into researching his builds and studying the game, right? In terms of his champion pool. Now, I felt like if there was a weakness with Trimby specifically at the beginning of the year, it was just like consistency, and he had to learn this whole like shot calling dynamic, right? Where he had to step up, and
he's probably the most vocal person in the mic checks now. If everyone, listens.
I mean, but he wasn't like that in 2021, right? So what we were able to do this year was to is to bring these systems in and to really teach the macro side, right, and to make a consistent set of rules that we abide by. That is more complex and flexible than any other team, I think at least. And then combine that with his massive pool, then we have this like walking demon bot lane that can pop up out of nowhere and play Rakan one game, Blitzcrank one game, and then pull out a Pike Alistar the game after, right? And it's something something people don't really know about Trimby is that he actually started off as a Thresh one trick. He was actually really good on this champion. So he's actually really clean on the melee supports as well.
Right.
Really. I mean, he doesn't agree with that in the current meta, especially since Hexflash is disabled. But in general, this is just tremendously helpful and so powerful to have in a kid.
Because I thought two factors in the final that, again, look, if you know the way MVPs are done, you're not going to get MVPs for what you picked and like background stuff. Like as a support, I'm sorry, you probably have to be the engaged support. That's the only way you're going to win. Spoiler, you have to be like Hillisang, the Ignar, these sorts of guys, right? But if you're the sort of player Trimby was, I remember him watching this and just thinking, me, he just smurfed on him the whole series. What the hell is this? Like, first of all, in draft, like one game they had to burn a lock span. Who else are you doing a lock span against in the finals, So that implies, I mean, you've seen it previously, he's going to fuck him up if he gets that lock. playoffs. I mean, there was that game in the playoffs earlier where you just like doing the most damage in the entire team, and you basically couldn't walk into an objective because if you hit you with the ult, you just instantly like 80% of your health gone, whoever you are. Like that's already implies to me, even for the scrims, that must have been a factor. And then the other one was, of course, the Soraka. Like it's all well and good people say like they just do it when it plays and wins the game. It's an OP champion. No one else thinks so, mate. Go and look at the meta. Go look at what they're picking. Go look at what they prioritise. Well, the joke is he not only picks it, and the games were great where he did, and it made comps in theory look like they were going to fall off, win in the mid game. But I would also say, who else is banning it against the other supports? You know what I mean? Like there's other spots where you just leave that up. You wouldn't even care if they picked it. It seems like he's had a massive influence, but it's a bit nuanced what he does for the team, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the person that influences him actually a lot in these kind of creative picks, especially like Nasus and Soraka, is LS, right? I think it is a bit of a myth to say that people don't think about Soraka. I know a lot of coaches, especially myself. I have zero interaction with LS whatsoever.
Okay.
I never watched his stuff until I knew that Trimby was watching his stuff. And for me to understand him better and to understand the reasoning, I started watching a bit of his stuff, right? But I think that a lot of these creative picks come from like his conversations with LS. And the powerful thing, and the person to actually give credit to here is not just LS, because I think a lot of coaches have said play Soraka and whatnot. It's the openness to be and the willingness to try these champions, and that's where a lot of the issues stem from. Not what coaches think are good or what some players think are good. It's the willingness for all the players in the team to accept a pick like Soraka, accept a pick like Nasus. Like try pick this. I mean, this is just a guess because I never worked with Odo back then. But imagine Odo from 5-6 years ago, and then Trimby locks in a Soraka. I'm not sure how that would go, right? But this year, I can tell you for sure the amount of openness that we've had in the team, the willingness to try out these picks, it's a real team-wide thing, as well as the individual like Trimby. A lot of credit should go to him, right? Willing to adapt and listen to the things he thinks are good and filter out the things he thinks are bad, right? Because a lot of the things that he says, the LS says, for example, I would say are not the most accurate or the most beneficial for our team specifically. But when it comes to small things like buying Dark Seal and support on first base or trying out these supports, absolutely. And being able to filter that out, choose the right things, being open and exchanging ideas, and the entire team coming around this and allowing us to practice this in scrims, this really allows him to shine. And the other thing about Lux and whatnot is that, when he's playing champs like Lux, he's basically just a mid laner. Like he was doing more damage than
everyone.
Literally everyone. And I think a lot of that comes from his ability to play a huge number of champs, but also if you see his solo queue, he's actually not that bad when he plays AD carry either. He's a pretty solid laner and pretty solid AD carry as well. So I think there's a lot of credit to be given there as well.
In terms of comp, like a lot of people obviously thought he was the MVP of the finals. It was a pretty clean performance. He looked amazing on everything basically that he was on, right? The problem I've noticed this player has is, as I alluded to before, if people don't know, a few years ago, he was actually very hyped coming out of the RLs. There was a time period when, just like all those mid laners came up and everyone wanted the Nemesis and Humanoid and those guys. Similarly, there was an ADC pool. The ADC pool was people like Kazi, like Comp. These guys were coming forth. Now, everyone knows Kazi. He went to Mad Lions. He had the success. But Comp, because he had the year in Vitality, where, I mean, eventually got replaced by Crownshot. A lot of people just thought, like, oh, whatever. I don't think most people watched Vitality then, mate. They weren't that very good a team. They just thought, oh, they're just crap. Even though if you ever look, it was the one where, like, their team never got together. Like, the mid laner couldn't arrive at one point. They swapped out all these junglers. There was a lot of problems that could easily have made the team all look bad, basically. And then when he came to your team now, and he's doing well, people just look and they see, like, Greek flag. He talks a tiny bit of trash. He's not even that trash talking, but he just every now and then he has a line, And then thirdly, he plays Caitlyn, so you can imagine, right? They can't form an identity. It's like, it's forgiven. He's forgiven. And it's like, mate, I know a lot about Forgiven's game. It's very different to Comp. So to me, Comp's more like the brilliant prototypical ADC. He's the guy that's like, I'm going to pick like this type, and I know the lane matchup. Like, am I going to be behind? I know in the team fight, I'm always going to be behind a perfectly kite. You're never going to get on me. Everyone's going to peel. I see him more in the traditional prototypical one. I don't see him as like the Forgiven, just like we're going to smash through the door every time and like, everyone get me like I'm John Wick against a million people. What's your thoughts on Comp? How would you define him or characterize him?
No flame. Forgiven, but I mean, it is kind of flame because I've heard some stories, right? But Comp is like a good teammate, non-bold version of Forgiven. He has all the mechanics, and he has all the mechanics and the champion pool to be a top 80 carry, but at the same time, he's actually a really good guy. He's a really good teammate in general. Like, he's the guy with the insane mentality, right? I think that at one point, everyone aside from me and Comp, were not entirely convinced that we could win, right? Okay. During the season, because we were going through a lot of hard times and difficult scrims. The players talked about this briefly in PGL, in LEC, where we were like 0-20 in 4 days, or something crazy like this in scrims. And this is where, like, he would just pop up and be like, guys, we're winning. We're winning the whole thing. And so, like, his mentality is really insane. But couple that with insane mechanics and a large champion pool, this guy is, I think, the best AD carry in Europe right now. Now, where his issues were previously, and where his issues always were, was that he wasn't the most consistent or the most intelligent with the way that he structured his lane phase and played around the mid game. So that was. I thought you were frozen for a sec because you were so.
No.
So that was kind of his big issue. For example, when he first came in and we were like scrimming, what wave would he be crashing? What mid wave can he challenge? How should he be swapping? This kind of like the bigger picture macro stuff is what he was struggling with, and I think that was the issue with him on Vitality, where he had all the right pieces, but he didn't have the right environment or the right coaches to kind of facilitate him with that specifically. And it was just a really perfect storm where we had the people that could talk for him, so he could focus on the game, at least in lane phase. And then he also had the right mentors around him as well, right? In the form of, I think Larsen's actually really, really smart about shifting, and so is Oda, right? So that's kind of where it came in, and he really got to shine. Just think of him as like Giga Greek Chad, but he's like, he wasn't the most intelligent, but now he kind of is, So he has all the factors as well. And then, you have Trimby too. I think that helps tremendously. I think Trimby is a phenomenal lane player as well, and he has a massive pull. So it generally gives them very, very good matchups.
You mentioned before Larsen, and I want to get your take on this because, I've made a literal video on this channel about it. I think he's the most, like, eternally underrated player I've ever seen play in the LEC, because all they do is like a famous quote, I think it's like an Einstein quote or something, which is like, if you judge a fish by its ability to ride a bicycle, then you'll deem it a failure. But obviously the inference is, if you put it in water, you want someone to swim, fish is perfect, isn't it? It's almost the best thing you could get. So I feel like all they do with Larsen is look at anything he isn't, and they'll nitpick for this, and anything he isn't means he can't be the best. So the joke is, whereas Caps can literally have years where he just ints a whole game, picks a crazy champ he probably shouldn't, a bit of an ego pick, like actually just like fucks up laning phase early and saves his flash. He can have those games because when he has the pop-off game, it's like fake as shit, isn't it? It's like, oh my god, the moves, Caps, and people will forgive anything if you can do those games. Hylissang's another classic example. Obviously, Humanoid's been the person where they've contrasted Larsen with him constantly and found Larsen to be not as good. He can't be as good because Humanoid's the clutch guy and the guy who doesn't give a fucking draft. He'll pick whatever he wants, which all sounds great, by the way, until like this split, it stops working. Then, by the way, it hits your whole team. Whereas I've always looked at Larsen's game, and it's like, if you just look at what he is, though, people know I'm a Froggen fan, so I have a different perspective on mid lane. Like, if you just look what he is, like some of the things you said before, it's like, he's pretty much, even though people say he doesn't have the greatest champion pool, it's like he always has the strongest laners and picks matchups in which he will win in CS. That's like job one as a mid laner to some degree. Then also, people used to say he just stays in lane, he's just boring and all. That was also when he had like the power farm jungler. When he has Malrang, I see him, he'll join into things all the time. It even looks to me like sometimes like Ari picks and stuff, so he can go off and help with these skirmishes and get in fights and stuff. And maybe he would have picked the boring Orianna 3 years ago, Give me some sense, like what is Larsen good at? And you've said, do you think he's the best laner in the West? Like, this is an area I feel like in the modern day, fans really do think like everyone can lane, which is like, look, as a general statement, it's true, but not in the way Larsen can lane.
Yeah, not everyone can lane, okay? That's 100% myth, I can tell you that much. Where to stand, the nuances of like positioning, trading patterns, basing, like there's so many things to lane and matchups and runes that, it would take too long to explain here, but basically the way I see Larsen is he's just like a savant when it comes to just breaking down lanes. And something else that is really underrated about him is he's a phenomenal laner. Now, phenomenal team fighter, sorry. He's a very, 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 very good team fighter, and he understands how to push his lead once he's got a lead in lane, right? So a lot of the discussion in review, for example, comes initially from like me or Odoamne, the more vocal people. But when it comes to like nuanced things or people where we're not sure what to do, he will just step in and say, "This is what we do, and this is good." And 95% of the time, it will be right. So he's actually really solid laner. As I said, I think the best in the West right now, and he understands how to push his lead in the mid game as well, and that's what makes him good. Now the problem is obviously, when we had a jungler like Inspired, he knows exactly how he wants to play the game, and he needs to facilitate for him, right? Which was that don't fight until I've taken my camps, right? And I will carry the game. Was that the best way to approach it? I don't think so. But it worked for them, and he did what he could to win. Now, if I had to give some criticism to Larson at the beginning of the year, it was like how he took and gave criticism, or how he expressed himself on positions where he could carry. But now
can be a little bit prickly sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But these things just don't happen anymore. I can tell you that much. Like he knows exactly when he's going to carry. He knows exactly how to communicate and what to communicate. And we tried to give him as much confidence as possible because we knew what this guy can do. And I can tell you for sure that this guy would have won championships years ago if he had the right team around him. There's an old saying that I told my team. And I don't want to call this cringe, but I'm going to tell you anyway, which was that Henry Ford once said that to get together is a beginning, to stay together is a process, and to work together is success. And a lot of these previous teams, I believe, managed to stay together, but they never really managed to play together in a cohesive and coherent, efficient way. And I think this year we managed to do that, and that's why we looked so good. If anything, I think that in spring as well, we really could have won. It's just that we had a little bit of a disagreement in how we should be approaching our series against G2, and that kind of led to a poor game plan. That's why I came in last time and I said, I really don't think it's a choking problem. It's kind of hard to play the game and to expect to have good results when you're picking Gwen on one side and Jinx Rakan on the other. I mean, that's what I'm going to say, especially into a top-centric team where you're playing topside into BB, and that's not really the way you beat that team, right? So that was kind of the issue behind it. Some of it stemmed from players, some of it stemmed from disagreement between coaching staff, but overall we managed to pull through, and I think Larson was key to that.
If we look at what he did in the final, especially, I think this was basically, if you wanted to see like how complete a player Larson is, just watch this final, because in game one he pulls out a LeBlanc. Again, that is not considered like advisable, like super strong pick in the West.
We had no idea. We had no idea either.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't even planned. So obviously that one was it turns out he's way better at LeBlanc than anyone thought.
Yeah, we always knew he was like one of the better LeBlancs in the server, but we didn't practice it a single time in scrims, and he just pulled it out of nowhere. And he said, "Okay, I think LeBlanc's good here," and we're like, "Okay, let's go."
Okay. Was Rogue always like that? Because I got the vibe when I interviewed Larson that like Freddie specifically was more of a guy where it's like, I think these are the really strong picks because it's, they were a lane-centric team, and I largely want you to focus on these ones. Like, don't necessarily go for niche or pocket picks or something. Is this a change that he was able to just in game one of the final pick a champion like that?
I think Simon's become a lot more flexible for sure. But at the same time, I feel like in this specific instance with like LeBlanc, he would have always been okay with it because, I mean, you could just look at the enemy comp and you could tell that it was a really free game of LeBlanc in terms of like team fighting and laning. Right? Yeah, basically everything, right? So I think that he would have always been okay with this. I'm not exactly sure if I'm not too sure about how inflexible he was before, but this year I think that he was pretty flexible and he grew a lot. And he became even more flexible throughout the year. So yeah.
And then obviously game 2, he plays an Ahri into Caps. By the way, that's just poetic justice if you think about the spring finals. And then game 3, it's classic Larson. He's on the Azir and then win the game. So like, give me some thoughts in that regard, because this was, I think, the main play. Let's be real. In the history of League of Legends, mid lane largely has been the most influential role. It's the reason why all the GOAT players pretty much come from the mid lane. I don't think you could probably be the GOAT from another position in terms of how fans and analysts think of the game. And particularly, they want the mid laner to carry the game. They want him to be the hero. They want him to be the clutch one and all those things. That's why he has been labelled the choker and the loser and the boring player. So what do you think this final, what was the statement about Larson do you think this final made?
I mean, I think he really cemented his position as like, I think the strongest laner in our region at the moment. And I also think that it was finally like his redemption clause, right? Because he's been chasing it for so long and everyone was doubting him, but he always had it in him. So.
Right, since you mentioned earlier, because the G2 series was the great example of this, but also, let's be real, you guys won against Wonder too, and I know now everyone changes it to like, because of that series, he's bad and terrible. It's like, people were putting Wonder like top 1 and 2 in their all-pro votes, guys. Like, he was very actually respected this split. He wasn't one of the people everyone thought in FNATIC had dive-bombed, So if you're Odoamne and you win a series against Wonder back-to-back with Broken Blade, and if you look in the finals, dude, this isn't like normal Odoamne. Game 1 is he's on. Okay, that's fine. That's Odoamne. Cool. Game 2, he's on the Renekton, which I'm sure most people thought was lol. Like, wow, why's he picking that? Because Rogue's just had some infamous games on Renekton, right? It's like I said in the watch party. It's like when Game 3, when they respect by the Renekton, you're like, this is a different game entirely. We're in a new world now of Rogue, mate. And then obviously Game 3, he plays literally Broken Blade's Aatrox into his Fiora, which obviously, it was picked the other way around. But like, this isn't just like, I'm just the boring weak sider who the bot lane has to win me the game. Like, who is Odoamne from this final? Is this like him unleashed or something?
Well, first of all, I think it's more important to talk about Wonder, right? Because I think it's so egregious to say this guy is not good or to say this guy is overrated. Like, he's very, very good. Without Wonder, they would most definitely not have made Worlds. I can promise you that. And I think he brought a lot of value to that team. In terms of Odoamne and what he was able to do, I think Oda's always been the kind of guy where he's insanely and intensely competitive, and he'll do anything it takes to win, or he'll do anything that makes him feel like gives us as a team a better chance to win in the matches. So, in this series, he was, for example, that Fiora pick, he was always trying to pick things that felt like gave us the best chance to win. And we knew about the Fiora. We were talking about the Fiora in 4-5. But we felt like that against our composition, it wasn't the best. And also with their jungle pick, Trundle actually needs to hit level 3 first before being useless. So we would have a turn of tempo or we'd be able to be faster on the map with Jarvan, which can skew that matchup entirely. So that was our calculated risk. And Odo wanted to put him on a champ that was difficult to execute in team fights, unless you spoke Mandarin, obviously, and you're like a Chinese Fiora. So that was like kind of our thought process behind it. Now, I wouldn't say Odo's unleashed. I think he's always had that in him. But something that really changed about him this year was that he grew tremendously as a person in terms of how he gave feedback. Now, people always like joke about him like flaming, and I know that Xerxes did an interview about him, but the way that he tries to give feedback, right, has changed tremendously. And yeah, he's just a really intense competitor. Now, it's not always for the good. Like, for example, I know for a fact against G2 in the spring split, he wanted to like take the game topside, right, for a multitude of reasons. Now, if you look at it from a game theory perspective as well as like a matchup perspective, that's not like the best thing to do, right? So sometimes he has those flaws, but in general, like he's a tremendous competitor and he's always driven to win. And if he has the right people around him, he's always been a champion. And I think that he proved that when he was in Schalke. So, during the miracle run, right?
Yeah. Well, obviously that was all the big narrative of Odoamne, was he finally won, right? Yeah, go on, did you have something more?
Yeah, so one more thing is that I think that Odo, like a lot of people meme or like talk about how he is very direct and abrasive, but I actually think that this is an extremely valuable quality. I think that right now in the moment, these kids or these like players that are young may not appreciate what he's bringing to the table and like through his brutal honesty. And sometimes, of course, he overreacts, but from my experience with the people that are abrasive and straightforward and honest to you, those are the people that actually look out for you and care about you and actually care about winning and hold the team to a higher standard. And that's really what Odoamne is to me. And I think that is his greatest strength as a human being. So I prefer that any day.
Even though obviously when he won, everyone did make it all about like he finally won after all those years, wow, he got it done and blah blah. Oh, did he get to the top of the mountain? All the usual narratives he give. What people don't know is, so with some players, some of those things really are just narratives to them. Some of them actually don't even think the same way fans think, or some of them just think like, I know players that have never won the championship, but they're like, I'm a brilliant player, I just never had the right teammates, and it doesn't get to me. It's actually some of them, for real, it's not the case. That's real with him. I can tell you from knowing him for many years, that is a real thing. He actually does himself think about that factor, like, why didn't I never win? saying, when he's in the teams that come second or third, he does think sometimes for real. Maybe I'm the choker. Maybe I'm part of the reason why. Maybe something about me under pressure gives up. And I know for him, in a sense, to actually for real win, not just have people like, I've said the same thing to me, you're one of the best ever, mate. Don't worry about if you never get the title, gives a fuck. But I know that to actually for real win is really important. And it's sort of, for me, it's almost like it made him feel like he is legit. He could be the best, right?
He's an absolute, like, tremendous competitor, insanely competitive, to the point where he's extremely self-critical or critical of, or holds his teammates to almost an unrealistic standard, I remember when we were in the FNATIC series in game 1, he came back into the room and he was like, I just think maybe we're not playing well right now, like maybe we're talking too much, we're just making poor decisions, like what's going on, and to be able to say that and then go into next game full of confidence and to compete, I mean, that is something in itself. But, once again, you can see the value in him being able to like have an open discussion about that, I mean, in that instance, we just told him, dude, we just made a couple bad decisions. Don't overreact. Just focus on this. We had good picks. We just made bad decisions here and there, and we sounded a bit panicked. And he said, okay, went out there and played the game. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it is insanely valuable for any coach and for any player out there. For any teammate out there to have this kind of person in your team, I think.
And then obviously, if people listen to the mic check of the final, the joke is, it reminded me of in spring, if you listen to the mic check of Yankos, it's like the vet who's like, look, I've been here a lot of times, like, guys, stop fucking around, like, it's game 3 now. Because that line he said when he was 2-0 up and then you swapped the sides of the game, and he basically said, look, me, Trimby and Larson were here this a year ago. We were here when it's obviously the one against Mad Lions from the year earlier. He was basically like telling them, like, don't fuck around, like, we've been up 2-0 before and you can lose in 5 games. It isn't like we're just going to coast to the win. Like, it seems like he also is like a leader.
He is a leader. He really is a leader. Sometimes, it's difficult for him to be perceived as that because he is so abrasive and he doesn't give the feedback in the right way. I mean, I think that's changed a lot, as I said, throughout this year, and he's not like this anymore. But in the beginning, it was always like that. But like what struck me was in this final series, normally I'm the one that comes in and does a speech, but he sat down, and he said, guys, I have something to say. We all just turned around and he gave the most, he told everyone what they needed to hear, which was that, look, I know that it hasn't been the best for us. We've had some issues as a team, but since coming to Malmo, I feel like we've come together as a team and we've really become a team. And I'm sure that if we play this way and if we play together, we're going to shit on everybody. And he just knew what to say, and he knew from experience, what we needed. And I think his leadership qualities that were always muffled under, I would say, the delicate hearts of professional players, right? Delicate egos of professional players really came out and came to full spring when he had a full team around him and he was given an environment where he could speak his mind and talk in an open way. And it was just incredible. And he gave a multitude of these throughout the series, and they really, really helped. So yeah, for sure, like full credit to him, and it was incredible.
You alluded to it earlier, but I think his longevity is truly incredible because it's not even just like, wow, he still plays in the LEC. It's like, bro, if you look at his peak level, he might be at his absolute best now, like a billion years into his career. Like, that just doesn't happen in League of Legends. It's so rare. I can count on one hand the players. Like, it's people like Reckless, maybe Suarez at some point. It's very rare people that can do that. What is it about him, do you think, allowed him to just keep returning to the top?
As I said, it's just that quality of like never being okay with being average, and something that people don't know about him is, initially when he first started in H2K and stuff, he was lauded as like the savior of EU, like he was an incredible laner, right? And people were talking about how he was shitting on Koreans in lane. This year I can tell you for sure that wasn't the case when we first started. Like, he was like crashing the wrong wave, he was like not crashing wave 3 properly, or like playing the bounces or anything like this properly. But his intense dedication and focus and competitiveness to the game, that drive, right, despite being the oldest in that room, minus Freddy, because Freddy's like a bit ancient, right, was just fascinating to watch. And I really felt like I saw a true competitor there. So yeah, I mean, that is why he's there. It's just his quality and person, like his qualities as a person. And something else that I learned from him was that he told me, he sat me down and he told me, like, you need to tell players what they need to hear, and you need to be able to read the room better. And by observing him, I think I learned some of those qualities too. So you can kind of see where that experience comes in, coupled with that, natural talent that he's always had, and just it's finally blossomed into a championship. So yeah, that's why he's been around for a long time.
The thing I found funny, because I actually obviously do a show where weekly we do just go by the games, and it's easy to overreact to wins, and then the next week we say the same team's terrible when they go 0-2. Right? When we had this scenario, people, I feel like, got way too much caught up in the narrative of the regular split, because what's funny is because the split began with Rogue looking a tiny bit dodgy, losing a couple of games, and obviously Rogue normally loses 3-4 games max a whole split. People were like, the sky's falling, and then crucially there would be some key big games that either the team looked like they got fluky on, or the other team just beats you. And by the end of the split, even though actually I will point this out to people, they didn't finish top 2 like they normally do, but they did finish first of all, top 2 was a tie, and then they were second after that with 1 game less. So it wasn't a bad split, certainly, in terms of normal teams in the LEC. A lot of teams would love a split like this, mate. But for Rogue, the narrative was they've got no chance. It's over. They've all gone downhill. It's like people forgot what happened in the spring. And then people also acted like at the end, sort of almost like you fluked 11 wins or whatever. That's pretty hard to do in LEC, I'll tell you. There's a lot of coaching staffs will tell you that's a good season. So coming into the playoffs, yes, there's a story after this about obviously all the scrim problems, etc. How do you view the regular split? How do you say this went for Rogue?
Okay, so let me tell you about the summer. I remember going to the room after week 1, 3 or 4 weeks into practice, right? And I sat Freddie down, and this kind of shows the character and the kind of person Freddie is as well. And I said, look, if we keep practicing like this and things go the way they are, we're going to come 5th, right? And I think a lot of coaches might see that situation and say, you're overreacting, right? Or, that's not on. But he sat down and he said, I agree. So what can we do about it? And the impact that has, right? And from then we facilitated discussion with players, and it was a real uphill battle. The impact that has, the ability for me to feel like I can, or for anyone in the team to feel like that they can speak about their problems to him, was, I think, tremendously helpful, right? And to be open about that. And I'm not an easy guy to work with, by the way. I have insanely high standards, and I'm also a bit of a perfectionist in a bad way almost, right? And every time I'd come to him about this, and we had our battles, he would sit down and think about it and implement it the best way he can. And I think that was tremendously helpful throughout our regular season. And to sum up why we didn't do so well in the regular season, aside from meta, was just in spring, we had this whole narrative about, okay, let's just try work around our problems and find alternative solutions. In summer, I think our mindset shifted to, okay, there are some problems that you cannot avoid, right? And this has always been kind of my way of solving issues as well. And we finally agreed to do it this way, in one way, right? We kind of agreed to do this in this way with the entire team, sorry, not in one way. And from then on, it was just obviously an uphill battle mentally, because you're talking about things that you don't want to talk about. You're hearing things that you don't want to hear, but you're addressing real problems. And I think that really showed in our championship. I think there was a guy called Edwin Land, the founder of the Polaroid. He said that the enemy of cooperation is politeness, right? And obviously I don't agree that, you should be rude at all times, but the idea behind that is there are some conversations that you must have and that you need to solve, right? And by addressing that directly, I really think that we came on top, and that was the reason why we didn't have that first place regular split. Because I mean, talk to anyone on that team, we're all focused on trying to win the whole thing, not a regular season, right? And I think we finally had that change and shift in mindset where we're like, okay, fuck this, fuck the regular season, we're going to win the playoffs.
Obviously, as you said, it came out in interviews and leaks, but the story was that Rogue's just lost 1 billion scrims, and the joke is they're not the team that would have be the awesome scrim practice necessarily. How does that happen for a team that everyone thinks is a choker and mentally weak, and then that actually yield a championship?
What do you mean by that? Do you mean by how does?
How do you go 0-20 and then win the fucking championship? It's pretty, isn't that pretty obvious that you shouldn't if you go 0-20? Is it a weird question?
I guess you could say that. Sorry, I misunderstood your question.
It's all right.
I know that H2K, when they went to Worlds, they didn't scrim at all because they didn't like each other. So but then they did pretty well, right? So I'm not saying that that's like the solution, but I think that scrims are not always the most important thing. They're really surface level. It's about how well you tackle issues and how well you build on things to be consistent, and how well you prepare in a best of 5 and how adaptive you are. I remember just before having the FNATIC playoffs, I said some things that were not really that acceptable, right? Because I was frustrated, and we gathered as a team and we're like, okay, Chris, instead of like being angry at me, they said, okay, Chris, like, why are you mad? And I said, I just feel like that we're not using the time between games to the maximum efficiency, right? We need to be figuring out if we want to talk about draft, or need to be figuring out if we need to talk about the game or give players some space. Like even small things like this that were abrasive and difficult conversations because they impeded and kind of, they were like intruded on other people's responsibilities, we're able to find a solution to what we needed to do, not what we wanted to do. And I think that's why, same for scrims, right? Even if you have like a 0-20 day, if you are doing something and you're testing something that you've never done before, you're going to be bad initially. But if you add a level of consistency to your game, and eventually that's still going to be more beneficial than not doing that at all. So that was kind of the gist of that. And just, I think the big narrative and mindset shift that we had this year was that we wanted to build a championship team, and we were willing to do anything that it took to do that, like no matter how difficult it was. And yeah, so yeah, that I think that scrims matter a lot, but it matters more how you use the time and how effectively you learn and how efficient you learn, like theory and execution and stuff like this, and find solutions.
How would you just briefly explain what happened in the upper bracket final? How did G2 just cruise to a win like that?
When we got 3-8? I mean, we had a difference in opinion on how draft should go, for sure. That was a small battle in itself. Like initially, the thought process was that we wanted to battle center, whereas I wanted like center gone entirely. And I actually think that we can take that route as well. It's just that center Seraphine as a champion is an extremely, like, it avoids all skill checks entirely. It just like clears the wave and runs around the map, right? So while I think that some center matchups you can like play aggressively and find lane leads still, I think we underestimated the strength of center after the nerfs. And that combined with slow adaptation made that series a bit rough. And we also had, I think, despite the draft disagreements, I think had still a winning draft. I think that first game we had something like Callista and then Renekton on top side. But we randomly, no, it wasn't Renekton, it was something else. But we randomly like dove top and they killed Odo when we have Renekton. And the whole idea behind Renekton was that we want to get pushed top and we want to like have first base and then take the first Herald and snowball the game that way. But then when we gave Herald, discipline really caught us. So it was a combination of two things. Like it was a disagreement in draft, a disagreement in how we wanted to approach the series, and a slow adaptation, as well as, which was the most important thing, just poor discipline inside the games, right? We had picks where, you know, even despite the agreement, we can win, right? Or that was still really good. I think it was Sivalulu, sorry. But you know, like it didn't work out like that because we just died and we trolled around the map. So I think that was the main issue. And then in finals, we were just like, okay, fuck this champ, we're going to ban it. You know, we're not going to play against center anymore. So it gave us a little breathing room.
After this, obviously, was the FNATIC series. Like, give us some thoughts on what was some of the secret to beating FNATIC? Because even though certainly they were probably the most questionable team in the playoffs. If there's a world where they don't win a game in the regular season, they wouldn't even be here. It would have been a Vitality or something like that instead, right? So this was a team where I always thought the whole split. It's like they never really looked like they got their identity. And in the playoffs, I'm not even sure if they ever like truly did. It's more like they sort of figured out like band-aids, or it's like we'll just go through this, or it'll telegraph the game a little bit, we'll just play like this. And that was working, you know, they were winning games because they have so much talent. But what was the secret to beating them? What were you seeing in the team that's like, this can be exploited?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can be transparent now because we already played against them. I think the issue with FNATIC was that they don't have a coherent system set in place in the mid game and the early game. So like what wave are we going to crash? How are we going to play X wave? What time are we going to get vision? And I think it comes from a lack of understanding of each other's roles in one way, but also a lack in, as I said, the systems and consistency behind that. And we always thought that was a problem. I know for a fact that for me, the top teams always had these systems set in place. I know that Dylan is always like a big systems guy, and he opts to set like easy to play systems and he, like just click and go comps for this. Whereas, for us, it was a little bit more complex, but I felt like that didn't really exist there. So if you actually see Razork's play, I think he played out of his mind, but it was also not set in stone on what they wanted to do in the mid game, how to shift, what position they wanted to take, how to retake. Like these things were not set in stone. They were set to the players, and just, I think that was a really big problem. And I also feel like that Razork couldn't play like he did in Misfits because, of the overarching idea that the jungler should be facilitating for bot lane. Right. And that's what it looked like to me anyway, from like an outside viewer, where he actually wasn't playing, like even though he was playing mechanically well and was making good decisions, he wasn't as ahead as he should be because of these issues.
Just for people who don't know, in Misfits, there used to be a solo lane team, basically.
Yeah. And then if you combine that, as I said, with the combination of not understanding each role or like understanding how to shift correctly or making sure that you're drilling those ideas in, I saw a really big problem. And then on top of that, I think draft wise, they were limited because they could not pivot to both sides of the map, right? I think Upset is like a really carry orientated player and he doesn't want to do anything else. I mean, that's just kind of how I felt, right? It's understandable because he has the mechanics for it, he has the talent for it, but at the same time, it makes you very one-dimensional. Whereas, I mean, I talked about this before the semis in Malmo in my video as well, my YouTube video, and I said, like, I think our advantage is that we have a flexible jungle, we're very consistent in the mid lane, but most importantly, we're able to pivot to both sides of the matchups. Like, we're able to pivot to both sides of the map, if we need to. And that's what we really did, right? We pivoted to both sides of the map, and we got leads top, and another game we got leads bot. Right, in one game we played scaling bot, and in another game we attacked top. Like we just had more opportunities to pick comps that were better for us overall, and I think that was like the key to our success.
The funny thing is, in some ways, what I said earlier about how if you have the crazy pop-offs, people will forgive a lot. I actually think the main thing, even though Rogue won this series 3-1, I think the main thing people will remember was just the stupid humanoid outplay when he was where he's going base, and then obviously he did the crazy Silas play, right? What would you say, humanoid? What are the challenges in trying to like play against him, or what can you exploit? Because a lot of people would say this is probably the worst split of his whole career. So, what was it like going against humanoid?
Okay, so the thing with humanoid is, I felt like in the previous years he played like there was no jungler. He was a complete psycho. Like he would just run up and just trade with you and find advantages. And then in matchups where he couldn't do that, he would just sit back and get the best scaling picks, like Corki, for example, and he would just perform on those. But those are out of the meta right now. So the only thing that we found that he could really do this on was a champ like Silas, where you can permanently play through mid and then go into bot. Whereas with some other champs, you can't do that. You really, really can't do that. So I think Humanoid, once again, I think is a terrific player. He's got championships for a reason. But once Malrang came in and started to punish these the overstepping in situations, and we started to punish like bad lane states, it became a lot easier of an equation to solve. And something that people don't know is Larson is actually a terrific Silas player. He's actually a really, really, really good Silas player. But we saw that in game one, and we're just like, okay, this is going. We're not playing against this anymore. And then we felt like they were kind of out of tools.
I also thought, since, like I said, they've tried to contrast those as the rivals because of when they came in and when they came to the top of Larson and Humanoid, and everyone always tried to contrast it as like one's like the Choker and the Mage Barbarian player. Spoiler, like Humanoid's played a billion mages, like you said. Azekok, he's played tons of splits on that. But the one thing I thought was quite cool in this particular match was, if that's the narrative around Larson, he got to play both sides of the Orianna Victor and win both pretty hard, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, but as I said, like it's a team game in the end. So it just depends on the surroundings that you've had. Like even Caps in Fanatics, he wasn't able to win multiple splits, right? And Perks was able to win with like, Trick and stuff like this. So it really depends on the team and the pieces that you have around that team and what makes them tick, and finding that kind of pattern and executing on that, right? So I'm not going to take away what Humanoid's done and what he was able to do last year. I think he played terrifically, but at the same time, it's just such an egregious narrative to say that Larson isn't as good, if not better than him in a lot of ways, objectively speaking. I think both have their strengths, and in our case, we were just able to use Larson's strength in a better way.
Obviously, the last question basically is, what should we expect from Rogue at Worlds?
Well, the thing is, it's a completely new patch. So we still have to scrim and figure it out. So I can't really tell you like what champions we're going to play or anything like this. But all I can say is that we're going to work super hard to try not disappoint EU as a region. And all the players, despite our failures in the past or whatever, we've always been giving 200% to try please our fans and to do the best for the people that support us always. So I mean that's just really going to be the main goal, to give it 200%, to try be consistent and to perform to the best of our ability and to get as deep into Worlds as possible. So, I mean, I can't really give you any specific things, because first of all, it's my first Worlds ever. So I don't really know. And second of all, as I said, the patch is completely new. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting.
At the end of the interview, do you have a final message, or do you want to thank someone or say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to thank all those haters that were talking shit in your YouTube video, and all those people that were like, oh, I don't like you because I don't like this guy because he was not talking. He's not talking or telling us about FNATIC, and he's completely ruining it and making it boring. I mean, mate, fuck you. We're trying to win championships here. We're trying to do everything we can to lift that trophy, and we did. So I hope that proved all those. I hope that you've learned your lesson now and you don't do that shit in the future, right? And really stuck on that. Thanks. You really drive me every day to work harder. Okay. So, yeah. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Kamsahamnida.
Yeah. Kamsahamnida.
This video was kindly supported by Kill Your Inner Loser, Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Paul Villa, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Pacy, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Torin, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Would you like to ask a question in my Patreon AMA? Maybe you want teasers, find out who the next Reflections guests are or upcoming talk show guests. Do you want to take part in one of those long donated discussions with me? Well, if any of the above or more sound interesting to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.